Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Addis Ababa and its changing pace in light of its disappearing heritage. As you know, Addis Ababa is one of the fastest growing cities in Africa. Of course, we are seeing highways, high-rise buildings, and so on appearing every day in the city. So this is a view of the Arat Kilo area. It's in our professional language we call it Tabola Rasa. It means complete urban renewal. We completely erase a whole neighborhood and build new buildings, offices, houses, apartments, and so on. And this kind of development is, of course, welcomed. And it's a sign of progress. It's a development at a very fast pace. But we should also ask this question: if everything that we have erased from this city, is it dispensable? Is it something that we really want to get rid of? Now the question is, what are we losing while we are doing this fast, what we call tabula rasa? You know, this city is a young city. Addis Ababa is relatively young compared to some of our old cities in Ethiopia. It started something like 125 years ago, thanks to the whims of one of our Queen Taitu, who preferred the lowland. In those days, the Addis Ababa area was considered to be rather pleasant. It had a pleasant climate compared to Mtoto, which was rather cold and windy. So she decided, while her husband was in campaign in Harar between 1886-87, to come down to this area which we call Fuluha, which is between the Sheraton and the Fuluha hot springs, and wrote him a letter saying that this city, I want to live here, and we are going to start the settlement. And the first place that she built, or her entourage built, was the top of the hill, which we call today the Imperial Palace compound. And they built the first structures, and that was the type of buildings that they knew how to build. You know, Ethiopia, after having so many, hundreds of years of urban and architectural experience, at the end of the 19th century, we were back to square one. The only way that they know how to build was to make these settlements which look like villages, and few dignitaries would build houses. The settlements look more like camps, military camps, like this one, military camps. And they converted that kind of settlement and created a series of settlements or villages all over the countryside. And Minilik was very clever. He invited regional rulers to come here and settle in each village. So there would be thousands of followers who came with the dignitary, each dignitary. And this was the area between Piazza, today's Piazza, and the Imperial compound, which was taken from the house of Alfred Ilg, who was a Swiss advisor to the emperor, who was advising him in engineering and other things. So the city was changing now. So we have to realize that this city, which is a very fast changing city now, had a very progressive development in its history. They built the first bridge, like the Ras Makonnen Bridge, around the beginning of the 20th century. That's how Piazza looked like. And this was progress, actually. In those days, like we are astonished with the flyovers and overpasses today, in those days to build a bridge was an amazing achievement. So we have to think, what is there? Is building a bridge, one of the first bridges, is also part of our heritage. It's part of our technological achievement. And then, in those days, to build a building, of course, they knew how to build traditional houses with wood, clay, plastered with clay, and they imported materials from abroad, like the corrugated iron sheet, which was brought from the port from Djibouti, which came from Europe, and they built buildings the way they knew it. But eventually, when foreigners started to come, Greeks, Indians, Armenians, and so on, they started to contribute to the construction and technology of the country, and together there emerged a kind of elite architecture, which unfortunately we are now losing slowly. And this, the materials that they were used, unlike today, were primarily local, meaning using local stone, local wood, local clay, and so on. Probably they would bring something like 20% of the materials, like the roof and the glass. That would be all that they would present. So they would bring from outside or import. So this kind of working and building with your own resources is also a big lesson. It's a big, it's part of a progressive society. It's a sign of also progress and being self-reliant. And of course, the plans eventually started to evolve, meaning that there were foreign influences, European and so on. And they were gradually affecting the way we build buildings. Cultural exchange of ideas, people learning from each other, and so on. So these immigrant workers, together with the Ethiopian masons and so on, created this fascinating architecture. And in those days, the most important nodes of the city were, by the 1910s and so on, was the area of the railway station, the Arada, which was the marketplace, and the imperial compound, which was the administrative center of the whole nation. So this started to grow around these poles, and life was being urbanized, transformed into a form of life that was rather new to our ancestors, who were most of them living in rural areas. So this transformation, growing slowly, learning from abroad, bringing in new technologies, and was really happening here in Ethiopia at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. So, within this heritage, you also have important historic events such as, now if you see this building, this is the house. Unfortunately, today the situation of the condition of the house of Alfred Ilk, which is squeezed between two apartments or condominiums. It's a house which later was converted to the first modern non-religious school. We had schools, of course, traditional church schools or madrasas, schools and so on. But the first modern school where students would learn mathematics, English and language and all that, where Liji Yasu, Teferi Mekonnen also studied, was actually in the house of Alfred Ilk. After he left, they converted it to a school. But imagine this school, this building, was going to be completely, erased or demolished. It was saved just at the nick of time, of course, with the help, intervention of Ato Arkaba. But we had all to go to complain, to tell him that this is a very important building, so let's save it. But unfortunately, the people who were going to demolish it cut the trees around it, which were more than 100 years old, and built this condominium. So, isn't it worth saving the first school of the country for the future generation to show? We have universities today, 30 plus universities, but where was the first school? And of course, after the Italian occupation, the city started also to be transformed and changed. And this is the National Theatre area where the Italians were massively constructing. During the Italian occupation, as some of you might know, the Italian occupation was what they call demographic colonization, where people were supposed to come from Italy to live in Ethiopia and of course cultivate and modernize the society and so on. So there was a rapid, a very strong, a very high construction activity going on. For the Italians, there was one challenge: to bring materials from Rome, from Italy, passing all these thousands of kilometers was an impossible task. So they had to slightly modify their construction and design policy and build with what is local, with what is available here. And the Italians, because they had the culture, a very old culture of urbanism, they also brought and started making urban spaces, public spaces, and so on. Now, with this new transformation that is going on in Addis, it's not only the heritage buildings, it's also interesting public spaces that we are losing. And we are not adequately replacing with well-designed, hospitable, friendly open spaces. You know, a city, any city in the world, try to remember any city that you know in the world. What attracted you when you go to the plazas, walk on the streets, and see some of the architecture, and especially the unique character of the cities? You will not remember a city that looks like every other city. The city that we remember is the cities with character, cities with a bit of diversity, with some kind of special, unique features. So, by losing these features, we are losing the uniqueness of our city, of Addis Ababa. It used to be like this in the 1920s, and today it is like that. And we don't know, tomorrow when the tower, when the Midrock Tower is built, it will also be different. But I'm not trying to say that we should preserve everything. What I'm trying to say is that there are important landmarks, there are important features of the city, such as certain streets, certain buildings, certain spaces that give Addis Ababa its uniqueness. So we have to give it attention and do that, because unfortunately our planners, the way they are trained is what we call in urban and architectural education, the functionalist modern planning, where it treats cities like a place for function, that there is a lack of understanding. There is also this important thing as living in a city where you have places to enjoy, places to entertain yourself. Cities are where we live, we work, we play, and get entertainment. So a friendly city should have all these features. The municipality is now a modern heritage. It's a building that has significance for this city. It connects across or through the Churchill Avenue, the railway station, and this City Hall building. It, according to the designer, Mezzadini, the Italian architect, it spreads its arms as if it is embracing the city. So these are features that are important for our city. Of course, one thing when you are thinking of character, what you should be careful is not to continue monotony. Monotony is something that every city should avoid. There should be in diversity, in the character and diversity of cities, one of the threats is monotony. We should build public housing. We should build public housing. But imagine if there were in between these houses, historic buildings that were saved, where they could be used for another purpose. They would create a character that would make our city better. Our open spaces, public spaces, if you saw a picture of this in the 1920s, it's a place where people moved. Now it's almost a bus parking garage. So a space like this should also be an important space where people, not all of us drive cars, and sometimes we want to walk. People want to sit and watch the life and sit under a tree in a city. So our open spaces should not only be leftover spaces, but properly designed public spaces for the inhabitants. The last remaining street. Now, it's not only buildings. I was talking about public spaces and areas. The last public space, the last street with a certain character that remains in Addis Ababa is the Mahatma Gandhi Street, which goes from Castelli restaurant down to where Enrico is. This is the only street with a character of its age, of the time of the bygone days. Here, there is craftsmanship. the skill of working wood, the skill of carving and making artistic expression. So craftsmanship in a society where there is abundant labor is important as a resource, and also as a means of creating employment for people. So when we do preservation, restoration work, we are actually recreating, or let's say regenerating skills that were dying, bringing them back to life and making them useful so that our city will be a better city. Next. These are some studies that we made about, with our students. So our modern planners have not, unfortunately, studied enough of cultural preservation or historic preservation. Today, now, in our school, we train, we teach that. It's part of the curriculum. In any school of urbanism and architecture in the world, nobody graduates before hearing something about cultural heritage and preservation. This has become part of the curriculum. It was not so in our country, but now we are gradually putting it in, and we hope that this will happen. About 10 years ago, I took some 25 students, graduating class students, to Aksum, and we were doing a survey in the old town. Actually, in Aksum, this is one of the cities that we succeeded. There is an old quarter of Aksum where you can see how medieval cities in Ethiopia looked like. So the students, I sent them out to look at the houses and so on, traditional houses. They came back and told me, "Sir, what do you think we'll learn from this? You know, these guys are trained to make 10, 15-story towers, cultural centers, factories, and so on. What are we going to learn from this traditional architecture?" I told them, "Okay, go and look. I am not going to say anything." A week later, after they have done the survey, they came, they were completely embarrassed, and they said, "My God, the knowledge that there is, that is embodied in this architecture is unbelievable. The way people use the space cleverly. This is knowledge that has developed through generation after generation for hundreds of years. And you cannot simply ignore it, erase it, and say, it's nothing. We have, it's us, it's our poverty, it's backwardness." No, it's not. There is a lot of knowledge in that. So they realized, and they told me, "We really take back what we have said. We have learned a lot." Another unique feature of Addis Ababa is, do you know one of the advantages of Addis, or one of the uniqueness of Addis Ababa, is the low crime rate? I don't mean there are no thieves and burglars and so on, there are. But compared to many African cities, this is relatively safe. It's because also of the way the city is, you know, unknowingly existing. It's a mixed city, where people, rich and poor, live not far apart, close by. If you look at many parts of the city, you see that. Unfortunately, when we do tabula rasa, when we erase and do urban renewal, we are creating more and more segregation. We are marginalizing a certain sector of the society and losing that unique potential of the city. This is an example of one building that was lost some years ago. It started with the construction of a modern block building there. Gradually, the value of the land changed, and they erased it, and it's gone. Now it's gone. When I said monotony and segregation, this is a rapid, one of the newly growing, expanding areas of Addis Ababa, where you see hundreds of condominium blocks and many hundred individual houses, most of it upper middle class, and this segregation is going on. We are going to pay a high social price later. I don't want to be the prophet to tell you this, but this will make us pay a very high social price. And we erase, and look at what we are replacing them. This is, in our profession, it's called bad urbanism. This is really urban design at its lowest. It is, you know, just making high-rise buildings will not be enough to create good architecture. You need better composition of urban spaces, the void between buildings. That is what we do in urban design. So this is going to be an urban jungle. Next. And where is it coming from? Most of the businessmen, they travel to Shanghai, to Dubai, and so on. Unfortunately, Dubai is becoming the model, the wrong model, because this model is not sustainable. For us, it is not sustainable. With a different economy, with a different resource, maybe. But for us, this is not a good model. And this is built on the desert. Most people don't know. It's on the desert, on open land, where they have heritage, they preserve it, at least whatever is remaining of it. And they have a low-rise historic quarter. At the beginning, they erased a lot, but now they have become so conscious, they even rebuild some of their heritage buildings. This is one of the rebuilt areas in Dubai. Historic, I don't know how many of you go there when you go to Dubai, but do walk there and see also they are preserving also their cultural heritage. Well, the remaining parts of Addis, some part of Addis, this is Piazza, an area, and it is a historic quarter. It's a place where you have a lot of historic buildings. So in our near future development, can't we integrate this and make interesting public spaces through preservation and so on? What I'm trying to say is you can have also outdoor public, indoor courtyards and so on, where visitors, I didn't want to put tourism as the main reason, because if we preserve it, we should preserve it for ourselves, not for tourists. If we do it well, then the tourists will be visiting it. There are some good acts, like saving the Addis Ababa Museum, the Ras Birru House, making it a museum. And our top model, Lia Kabada, is going to restore this building. It's a very admirable act. She's spending a lot of money to preserve this building. And this is the Goethe Institute, where we mentioned earlier, Judith mentioned earlier, that I restored and converted to a cultural center. The extension of the Alliance Ethio-Francaise, the continuation of an architectural tradition into the modern. And one of the most amazing things I saw last July was in Singapore. The Singaporean. Singapore is half the size of Lake Tana, and 5 million people live there. And this Marina Bay is one of the most expensive places in the world. But look down, they have preserved their heritage. They have erased a lot of historic areas, but finally when they woke up, they said, my God, what are we doing? So now today they have the strictest cultural heritage laws in the world. And they look at those red-roofed Chinese houses. These are traditional Chinese houses. And they have integrated with the modern. So when you walk on the street, you are walking along this human scale, low-rise buildings where you have shops, where you have cafes, and so on. It makes life so much better in the city. And then behind you have the high-rise buildings. And this is where people hang out. This is where, so to conclude, I want to say that if we want to have a better city, we should give a future to our past. Thank you.